long time ago.
So we'll call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order at 6:37 p.m. We don't have any mail, any meeting minutes to review, any reserve fund transfer, line transfer, so we can just go to the budget or the special town meeting review.
So thank you for having us come in. I thought it was great if Charlie could come in, and he was going to talk to us about some things that he had worked on with Sandy this afternoon that he had shared with me. And I think it's important for him to explain to all of us as a group what they have come up with for the funding of Article 1, and we can all talk about it. So there's nothing set in stone. This is for us to really discuss the best options. So Charlie?
So Sandy and I had looked at the numbers for fiscal 19 this afternoon. Back last week, if you remember, I specifically said I had not gone through it in depth. I wasn't willing to make a recommendation as to whether we should in fact use a debt exclusion to fund the $1.5 million in additional money needed for this project versus doing it within the levy limit. Right now, the $2 million that we had previously voted in May of 17 is being funded under the levy limit, not under a debt exclusion. And the concern back on last week was whether we in fact had enough spare change in raise and appropriate to in fact do the additional 1.5 million in under the levy limit. A few things have happened since we had the votes in May for the annual budget. One is we had about a net change to the positive in state aid of about $10,000 because of last minute changes in the budget and such. We have another $30,000 in new growth. When we were using figures back in May, the assessors estimated new growth at 80,000. They're estimating it at 110. In addition, the largest change is in the local receipts. When Sandy had come to the Finance Committee and talked with the Board of Assessors about the local receipts and the estimates for fiscal 19, she had used $996,000 approximately for motor vehicles, the excise tax that we collect. That actually came in at about 1.2 million, so $200,000 more than the 996. Now that's for fiscal 18 that we finished. We don't see a reason why motor vehicle receipts will go down from fiscal 18 to 19. They've been going up each year. When we hit the recession back in 08 and 09, it was a different story, but that's not happening right now. So we should be able to use more or project to use more of the motor vehicle excise receipts. However, neither of us would recommend going up to the full 1.2. We're recommending using 1.1 or about 100,000 more than we anticipated using back in May. So that gives us about another $130,000 to play with in terms of what's available for raise and appropriate. Obviously, we've got the $300,000 over here that we have a general policy agreement. We don't touch that. We use that as a cushion. We use that as a good faith measure to the townspeople to say we're not going to be taxing to the full levy limit. On the other hand, obviously we were talking about doing the 1.5, and we have a bond payment, principal and interest to cover for that. There is now sufficient money besides the $300,000 to fund the bond payment for fiscal 20. And that still leaves a few places in terms of comfortableness that we can deal with. One is, as I mentioned, we are not recommending fully utilizing what we think is the actual motor vehicle excise for fiscal 19. We're coming in at 1.1, it's coming in 1.2. That gives us a cushion of $100,000. Also, for the ambulance revenues, if the revenues go up, and they should, based on the reports from the outside firm that's now going to be doing the ambulance billing, it should be significant, more than a couple $100,000. We're not using that. We're not assuming that money's coming in for fiscal 19. It should, at least for the last, let's say, 8 or 9 months of the year, but it gives us another cushion to play with in the sense of I see more positives happening, in the sense of things, more revenue coming in than we anticipated in places where it's not going to come in versus what we're anticipating. So it gives us a comfortableness to make a decision to, in fact, fund the additional 1.5 under the levy limit. Now, there's a caveat on that. There's still 90,000 or more that we'll need to fund for the fire suppression system. That's also under the levy limit. But given the comfortableness that we have right now, given the places where I think more revenue is going to come in than we're actually using for fiscal 19, I think fiscal 20 will be able to make ends meet. This is not to say that there wouldn't be any tightening whatsoever, in the sense of it will be closer than it otherwise would be. But on the other hand, there's not a situation where we're going to have to make drastic changes in any level of services and budgets and such simply to fund the 1.5. So my recommendation with that caveat and saying, I understand there's nervousness. I understand that there's always going to be a little bit of tightness for fiscal 20, is to fund it under the levy limit. Besides the finances, the other reason for doing this is I think it has a better chance of passage. Right now, we're at a point where we've got real numbers, real bids in, we're ready to go, we can make this happen if we're funding it tonight. Going with the debt exclusion requires both a 2/3 vote tonight and a majority vote at a town election a few weeks from now. I mentioned how much more difficult it is to get a majority vote at an election, because you will have a number of people who are against the project, who don't want to fund it whatsoever, who will come to a debt exclusion vote and say no. That won't be here at this meeting, because it's far simpler for them to come to the election, take 10 minutes out of their time and vote no there than vote no here. So if we want the project to move forward, and I do, the best opportunity for that to happen is to fund it tonight inside the levy limit. And that's where I am. Sandy's looked at the numbers, Kim's looked at the numbers, and by all means, you talk with them, talk with me, and I'll try and answer any questions.
I like the fact of being conservative. Even the number from the Board of Assessors is a little on the conservative side too, because we didn't factor in the growth, personal property. But it's not a big number, so it chose not to use it. Leave that in there for cushion as well. The number did come up higher than we originally expected, so that was a plus. And kind of anticipating some growth for the next year as well. So that Board of Assessors believes that those numbers will be sustainable in the future for a while anyway. So I like the idea, if we can do it inside the levy limit, that would be my choice. I think more people would like us to go that way than not, because it does limit us to what we can do in the future. Not that we're reckless spenders anyway, but for those people who think that it would leave the opportunity to do more heavy-duty spending, it takes that off the table. I'd like to see this to go forward, because I'd like to see it done. It's just been on the table for so many years. It's just unfortunate the way it all came down with the estimates that we had that proved to be not very good at all. And of course, the market conditions changed dramatically. Building costs went up 25–30% in the last few months. Just materials cost. This is what it's going to take to do it and do it right. I'm going to support it.
One thing I did not mention, Kim had asked me to take a look at the school project, what's going on out here right now, along with the roof numbers. From the looks of things, based on the actual contracts we have, with the roof project done, with the siding, windows, and doors certainly coming slowly to a conclusion, and knowing what the numbers are like and knowing the change orders, it looks like we had about $2.2 to $2.4 million in savings. John may have a different number, I'm not sure, but that's what it looks like. Now, that's not all us. Let's say roughly about half of that is reimbursement from the state, so they get in essence to keep their money. About $1 million of it is for us, that we won't have to bond. So instead of bonding, I think it was 3.8 I mentioned, it would be closer to 2.8. So now this money doesn't get to be used someplace else, whether it's council on aging. But what we're saying is that big debt exclusion
We had already voted
is now a
to go
little
back.
bit less in retrospect. So my hope is at least we should save the people money where it's possible and not spend it where we don't have to. But my point to everyone is, as much as there will be a tax increase because of this, we're at the same time bringing it back at the other end on the schools. Sorry, I had forgotten that when I was discussing everything else.
Do we have rough numbers on what it would do to the average tax bill for FY20?
Right,
$115.
Quite a bit annually, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. So John Campbell was great enough to make these presentations, and on the back of this presentation is the debt schedule.
Oh, okay.
and that's the entire amount. Obviously, we've already voted the 2 million, so roughly 30% or so of the, it'd be roughly, so the addition is only about 30% of the total.
Just remember that, I have one, thank you. That's a rough estimate on the debt schedule.
Yeah.
It's based on, you know, a 4% interest rate. But that gives you an idea of how it will impact.
And it's using the fiscal 18 base, it's
Right.
not using the fiscal
Right.
19 base.
John, over on the table, what's different from this printout from last year?
All the drawings are different. Those are the drawings that went out for bid. The ones you got a year ago, that was the
Schematic.
schematic drawings. This is the final product.
And this includes the parking lot work, all that site work? Okay. Folks have questions for the board, Sandy, or anybody else?
So these numbers look like they're taking the lowest offer.
They have to.
Lowest bid.
Lowest bid. they have to.
Lowest responsible bid, which was the low bid.
Did we ever confirm if they were able to validate that or not?
Yes,
They were?
John, the low bid's a valid bid.
Yes, correct.
Does that include the 6 alternates or some
That
other
Yes.
that
those?
includes the 6 alternates.
Yes.
The 3.5 includes the 6 ultimates, also a construction contingency.
Of 25%.
No.
20%.
No, the construction contingency is 10%.
10%.
It's built into the soft cost,
When the
right?
original numbers were being talked about how do we get to what the total number is, you take construction costs and add 25% to cover all your soft costs. In that 25%, you have architect, OPM, contingency. So since then, since that initial number came in, we had the chance to break it out, work with the budget, work with John, work with Joy. Kim, excuse me. Yeah, sorry.
I'm like, you're
My
talking
mind's
Joy?
short.
And why is she talking?
And actually break that 25% out into the individual categories of where they belong. So in a renovation, we typically would suggest our clients carry 10% to deal with those unexpecteds when you break into those sidewalls of the existing house.
Okay, where'd the 25% soft cost go from last week?
It's in there.
So the 25%, 10 of it's contingency, 8 to 10 of it's your architect, 3 or 4 of it's your OPM, and then the other few points are for materials testing, other items in the
The
budget.
low bid was like
that-
2.7.
Yes, 24.6.
Yeah, so when the,
So the 3.5 less that is the soft stuff.
yeah, so when the numbers first came in, people said, okay, what's this total budget going to be? Without having built the framework of the budget yet, the easy rule of thumb is take your construction cost, add 25%, and that gives you your total project budget. And then when you have a little more time, you break that 25% into all the different line items, and that's what happened at the end of last week. We're able to take those bids, look at the bids, look at the line items of what we needed for the rest of the items and kind of broke that 25% out into, I forgot my glasses, so we've got,
We've got 2.7 for the construction, we got 104 for the
thank you.
construction alternates, 124 for the design fees, 156,000 for the OPM, 25 for the utility back charges, another 5 for the furnishings, 5 for the phones and computers, 10,000 for miscellaneous costs including moving, 35,000 for construction inspection testing, another 5,000 for printing and advertising and such, and the construction contingency is 287,000, which is equal to 10% of the base amount plus the alternates. So you throw the alternates in there, you get up to 2.846, and this is the contingency is roughly that 10% there. That brings you to 3.5.
And this isn't, just to refresh my memory, from the May meeting, did we vote to create an expense line for the Council on Aging to cover some of the initial moving expenses?
We did.
Yes, it was.
Okay. Please, anyone want to make a motion? However way, and then we can open up discussion.
You mean debt exclusion, recommending a debt exclusion list. So who makes the final decision on Article 1 if debt exclusion or Article 1 if not?
Well, ultimately, the townspeople do, in the sense of there'll be a motion on the floor. Someone's going to make it. It's either going to be a motion that's contingent on a debt exclusion or a motion that's not contingent on debt exclusion. And then the town meeting will vote it one way or the other. If you're asking when the board of selectmen who's, go to town meeting in a few minutes and motion, they're listening to you folks also, because I think that the board can tell me I'm wrong, they'd rather have a united front one way or the other.
Yes.
In the sense of having the board and the finance committee on the same page, either that we're doing this with a debt exclusion or we're not. The board, as far as I know, is in favor of moving ahead without the debt exclusion at this point. But they're asking, in essence, they're asking the finance committee to support a motion without a debt exclusion.
So I think, I talked earlier, my position from last week hasn't changed. I think if we'd come in at something reasonable, as far as a percentage difference from what the project had originally been estimated to, I would have said I'm all for it. But I think the sheer cost increase in the short time frame, notwithstanding the work that you guys did obviously this week to try to figure out what the impact would be, but we had months of work, we had meetings with the departments, there was a conscious decision made at that time for what the budget was going to be, and I think again, for less than a week's worth of time to send the warrants out without any numbers and then spring this severe cost increase now, I just can't support it. And as I mentioned, whether you're for it or against it as a resident, if you're for it and you see that it's this much of an increase, you may be more apt to come in because you think it's going to receive a lot of pushback and vice versa. If you're against it, if it was a few percentage, increase over what the original estimate was, you might have said, don't worry about it. But for less than a week, when you have this much of an increase, I think is, again, I know that wasn't the intent whatsoever, and I'm not saying it was, or just the way the chips fell, but in my opinion, it's just too much, and I couldn't support it without the debt exclusion to give more time, more thought for options, and seriously understand what the implication would be under the levy.
I think that, because I'd like to see it go, because it's been kind of a pain in my back for a long time. But we've spent probably about $400,000 in the last 6 or 8 years on architects and everything else. If this project loses tonight, we go back to day one. We hire a new architect in some type of a building, and there's another couple $100,000 we'll have to come get from you to do that. Do we have a chance maybe to get this building done without a debt exclusion?
Well, again, being new, and
Yes.
I hear what you're saying, it's been, a big monkey on everybody's back who's been involved, but for those of us who can't be as involved as some of us are, or some of us are because of, our
Yeah.
positions or whatnot, I just don't think it was enough time, unfortunately. It was just too much of a swing, in my opinion. I don't know how you guys feel.
Do we know what, last week we said there'd be 168K plus cushion in the absence of all the info you just gave us. So if we take that 230, 240 is that you just laid out for those various reasons, add that 168, there's 398 to 408 cushion. Is that how we're interpreting the info?
Well, we have the 300,000 over here, that is we set that aside and not use it for anything. What I'm saying, Sandy,
Sandy?
without the $90,000, I estimated about a $25,000 cushion. With the 90,000, obviously, the cushion is negative in the sense of we're making assumptions that because we're being so conservative right now, that we will still be able to cover the entire cost of the fire suppression system without going back into other departments and grabbing money.
Right, but you were saying that we had the $25,000 cushion,
Right.
but that's with leaving the 300
Yeah.
on the table
Right.
too. So what we actually have would be leaving 325 on the table. Then you take the 90 off that, we're still leaving 235 on the table.
And that's assuming the most
Right.
conservative estimates that we're using right now,
Right.
which is that we're going to get another 100,000 motor vehicle, probably for fiscal 19 than we're estimating. We're assuming that the ambulance receipts are going to be higher than what we're estimating right now. And then into fiscal 20, obviously, we're going to have more new growth, more of other things. Obviously, there'll be demands on that money. And as I said, I'm not saying it won't be a little bit tight. It may very well be. But what I'm saying is that we can make this work without having, people are talking, we're going to have to cut budgets or lay people off or something. No, we're not going to be going there.
And you have to remember that if you voted with the debt exclusion, the same amount is being added to the taxes, but it's being added above what we're already taxing, and you're leaving that gap. So you're leaving all that 600,000, which 580,000, I think is what we estimated would be leaving on the table this for FY19. So next year, a couple of things go up. We are getting closer and closer to the levy limit. You still are adding that payment on top of the levy limit, the debt exclusion payment, where if you do it within the levy, it's not going to be added on top. It just gives the town less of an option to spend more money. So it's sort of a control on your spending. Which, I mean, yes, we have to look at what if we get a new sped student or something else goes up. You have to save some money for that type of thing. But if you leave a huge amount of money on the table, then it's also, well, why can't we afford that contract? You left that much money on the table. So,
Or we could lower the property taxes, right?
I don't know, that would be a vote too. That would be another way to vote it.
And the tendency for our town meeting, as much as it's fairly conservative, is that in fact, if the money's available, there's a tendency to spend it.
Right.
And it becomes an issue with contract negotiations too.
Not that we're trying to artificially keep that levy that low, but a lot of towns in the past, I'm going to say 7-8 years ago, we used to tax to the levy. We'd always tax to the levy. We started leaving money on the table purposely. So,
What do you see as the benefit of on the debt exclusion?
Time. Like I said,
That's not always, I mean, we may be in the same
Sure.
situation.
but you gotta think, if you're a resident and you go out on Monday night and you get the warrant and it's blank, and then you find out days later what the cost is, and you've got kids you need to, it's just, we, like I said, I attended all these meetings before I was even on finance committee, all the work with the departments and the excess, a ton of thought went into it. And to just, again, back of the napkin in the course of less than a week, to me, just, I don't feel comfortable giving a recommendation. And even to Sandy's point, it's on top, which leaves this big excess that we may spend. But like she said, a few things go up and up and up, and now you're squeezing that. So if we're under that levy limit, we go up and up and up, and now we're squeezed even more, and I don't fully understand it. I don't know if you guys fully understand it. And like I said, I appreciate the work that you did to pull together some of the conservative estimates, but at the same time, you know, we took weeks to look at those numbers and to review them with the departments.
So the time you're looking at is the time between tonight and a ballot vote?
Yes. Yep.
That's the only advantage.
Well, not the only, but that's the
Well,
main
the
part for
time
me.
advantage,
I had
I
said
guess,
last
is what
week,
you're
if we had gotten this number a month ago and we could have communicated it, you know, a little more formally, then,
Yep.
you know what, if we decide we can fit it and we crunch the numbers and we look at what we have and we say, okay, you know, if we get one additional sped student and it, you know, equates to what it was in the previous year, we feel comfortable. If we get 2, we feel comfortable. But we haven't been able to do any of that. And like I said, the residents, you know what I mean? If it, like I said, if it was a reasonable amount, but to
Yeah.
come in
I know,
at 2 million and then
it's
have
an
it come in at
awful lot.
3.5,
I do.
a year and a half later, I think we just shot ourselves in the foot, and I don't think it's right to spring it on folks in the middle of August at a special town meeting with less than a week's notice.
I think our challenge as a town is that the technology, in spite of the fact that it has allowed us to communicate so much easier, there's a smaller and a smaller percentage of people who stay as informed as you or anybody else around this table is. And I applaud the desire to want to let the town and have much notice when you're talking big numbers. The sad thing is they have a lot more ability to be more involved than they are.
Sure, but even Kim had mentioned last week that there's less people now volunteering for boards because people's lives have changed. They're busier, they're working out of town, whatever that may be, so. Again,
I just, to your point, I applaud the idea that we want to try to give people as much information and as advanced information as you can. I'm just saying that the small percentage of people who are focused on it, I don't know that that's as big an issue. Sometimes I think maybe things should draw them into getting more involved. What would that number be all about?
Well, we'll swallow a poison pill for the sake of getting people involved.
Please don't, Lenny, we need you.
I don't know if I describe it in that term, but I understand what you're saying, I do.
And even for us, because I know I've been harping on the resident information, but even for us, again, I know this is my first time on the finance committee, but it's a lot of money, and like I said, it's so drastically over what was originally voted on a year and a half ago, and I just have trouble recommending it on such short time frame.
You're looking at over 50% of the population, close to 50% of the senior citizens. And there are people too who vote.
Well, some of them who may not have seen the Facebook post because they don't use maybe they don't know what the number is. You know what I mean? If they're only
The point
relying on
is
that
that
warrant.
we have people on elections who will never attend the meeting, never go in there and come in just because they got one mindset and vote it down. If this is voted down based on recommendations from the finance committee, then a year from now it's going to be twice as much as we're still going to be trying to put this up. So one way or another, it's going to come out.
I hear what you're saying. It just doesn't make it right.
I understand
And I
what you're
totally
saying.
respect what you're saying, I really
Yeah,
do. But
same
I'm
here.
curious if any other finance committee members, Diane, do
I'm
you have
tending
any?
to lean towards, I really want this to pass. And I think the best place is within the levy.
Bill?
I think if we drag our feet and spend so much money already on this project.
So, this caught everyone off by surprise, right? So we all had an idea what the budget was going to be for next year, right? What are we giving up if we accept this and it's approved?
Why, that's a really tough question to answer, to be honest. Like, that's an unforeseen thing. Like, typically, we start off with level service and, we generally have an idea that, some things go up. But, what else do we have on the horizon? We have this wage and personnel
Yep,
evaluation. We have contracts, for sure. Who knows what's going to do with health insurance, right, Charlie? I mean,
Right, I mean, so,
there's nothing major.
again, right now, only a month into,
Yeah.
month and a half, for instance, so.
So some of these we can make assumptions on, right? Like
Yeah, absolutely.
X percent.
Yeah, like 10% for health insurance or 12%.
Yeah, so what does that look like in terms of our finances for next year if this is approved?
Well, because those things can be funded. What happens is that we do level service, we know what the contracts are right now, so people who get step increases, et cetera. Then the question becomes, really, after you've done things like health insurance and with the retirement and such, what's left? And that's what's available to spend. And you start making decisions about what you can afford if we're negotiating contracts for wage increases or salary increases in fiscal '20. You say, well, this is what we have available. What can we fit in? What can we do? What can we not do? But I don't see a problem with covering those things that we know are going up already, in the sense of that we're legally bound to pay. It's going to be a question of the variables of, for those things that we've not reached agreements with, what can we afford and what can we not afford?
Melinda, do you have an opinion?
The only question I have, just because I moved here a few years ago, is besides COA, besides the school, do we have any other projects that folks have been kicking around or developing or doing research on that are on, I don't know, our 10-year horizon line? I'm just trying to get a sense of, because I know this was a very long
Yeah.
process and was constantly being brought forward.
Yes.
School obviously has been going on for a while.
Yep.
But is there anything else that, beyond sort of the operating budget looking okay with the cushion, anything else that we see that we'd have to, if someone asked, that we'd have to say that's going to have to get put off for a while because we couldn't do?
You know what, I don't believe that there is, but I think that by our capital plan, there are certainly things that we've been doing, like the doors at the fire, at the highway department. So we're slowly making stride within the capital budget, but
Repairs, improvements.
yeah, and we have like a 5-year plan on roofs and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I think the major renovation obviously was the elementary school here.
Yeah.
I know that at Silver Lake, there may be things that may happen, but what we do is we have in stabilization amount of money that we specifically put in there for future repairs of Silver Lake. So I can't think of anything that is absolutely major for projects.
Nothing of this magnitude.
Nothing
If
of
this
this.
were under the levy, if it were voted to go into the levy, the excess that we would lose wouldn't go to the capital plan for the following year, correct?
Right, so what will happen is, you know, obviously, we get our capital items from free cash, which is money
Right.
left over. So if this goes within the levy, certainly, you know, we're conservative anyway on budgeting. And so, you know, unless we're cutting budgets, we should expect to see, you know, pretty steady free cash.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because I know there's a couple of major projects, well, not projects, but capital expenses in the next few years, the fire
But-
engine.
Yes,
Excess levy does not go to free cash.
no,
Because excess levy is money you've never taxed.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's money that never comes into the town.
But the budgeted amounts that are not spent is what turns into.
Right.
And then the other way we get capital items is, you know, by that extra percentage on food tax. That money has been flowing to the capital plan. We used to use overlay, we're kind of gotten out of the habit of that. You know, but certainly you're absolutely correct. There are some, you know, fire engines that are, may need to be, I don't know, I think it's an ambulance next. Yeah, I think, no, we just did the ambulance, so you're right, it would be an engine, but I think that's in 3 years, because we just did the
I think
firefighter.
they need to start budgeting for
Yeah,
it
yeah.
in the next year.
Yep. So we were lucky enough last, not that we're guaranteed this is gonna happen, but the last time that we pursued it, we were actually gonna lease it, and we had the lease payment set, and then we were lucky enough to have the fire chief retain a grant, and we didn't need to lease it. So we certainly, for those kinds of things, would look at a lease payment, which would be part of built into the operational budget. So it would eat up the levy part more than it would capital items. So you're right on target when it comes to that, something like that.
How much have we spent on the school for repairs over the last 2 years?
I don't know, 8 million?
Well, I mean,
All 10 mil?
No.
well, this project is, I mean, budgeted at 7.2 without the fire suppression system. So, you know, when I said the overall was probably 2.2 to 2.4 down, so we're talking more like 5.2, 5 for this entire project, again, without the suppression system. The suppression system brings up to 6. But if you're talking about repairs to the school, and we did boilers, we've done lighting work and things like that. I'm sure there's, you know, there's probably a few $100,000 for other things that we've done at the school, whether it's the boilers, the lighting, things like that.
We did some windows that were breaking, I mean, just stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just stuff we absolutely had to do.
Yeah, and you know, we're gonna know in about 20 minutes of how badly the residents want.
Now, if we don't do this, the repairs on First Tavern, there's a lot of repairs that have to be made within the next year or so, correct?
Yes, but we can't
Can't
use this
use that
$2 million.
$2 million for that.
No, we can't use that.
No.
That will be subject to all those repairs.
We will be,
Yeah.
absolutely, because, you know,
If we
we've
don't
been
do
pretty
something now,
fortunate that
yeah.
somebody has $100,000. But that's okay, I mean, it is what it is. Like I said, I totally respect and understand where Lenny's coming from, without question. I want you to know that. I really
Yeah,
do.
I do as well.
Yeah, but you know, we've been working on it for almost 20 years, and I totally understand the feeling about, we just got these numbers, and, you know, why are we gonna rush into this? But know that we are vetting every step of the way. Like, we're looking at all of the numbers to ensure that they are what they need to be, and that, you know, we will be watching for any sort of savings that we can have. But again, at the end of the day, we are building this for our seniors, and my hope is that we have seniors, even if they're not on Facebook, that got this and know that this is in play. And so, as I said earlier, we're gonna know in about 20 minutes if the people of Halifax want to support this project. We're hopeful that they do. You know, I know that everybody in this room has done everything they could humanly do to get this project to be passed. And my hope is that we have the support that we need to be able to complete it.
I think too, now we're at the point where we're gonna present what we think is the best financing option. So if you like this project, this is what we consider to be the best financing option, the town will vote on it.
Yes.
So given that, right, either way, we're gonna find out what the town thinks about it, but at least from my personal perspective, I feel like I'm charged with bringing forth the best financing option.
Yes.
And then allowing them to decline it or accept it.
Yes.
So I completely understand, because last week I was way more inclined to support a debt exclusion, because I didn't know about that cushion. But I think given that we'll have a comfortable cushion, and I think moving forward, having the same kinds of meetings like we had this past winter with all the department heads and just get everyone on the same page every time is probably just a useful exercise for all of us anyway.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not even just when we think things might be bad.
Yes, I agree.
Because I think moving forward now, we will have to make choices about things, but I'm more comfortable now fitting it under the levy limit using conservative estimates of increased local receipts and the ambulance. So.
Just a couple more questions. So I know the water department infrastructure is beyond its useful life at this point. If we have major catastrophes there, is that funded wholly out of the water enterprise account?
Well, it would probably have to be a debt exclusion, which is paid on the water bill, so it would.
No, these water bills, the water rates would simply have to go up to
Right.
cover the additional costs of whatever, whether they bonded, whether they're paying straight out. If water goes to water.
Yes.
It's not going to be funded out of the
So
property.
Still an expense to the
yeah.
taxpayers.
But it doesn't come out of our,
No, but it's still an expense, yeah.
Yeah, the other point is that what major changes or options do we have if we do go with the exclusion and carry to the 15th? Nothing really changes.
No, but we should have, the
More
conversations,
information.
in my opinion, that we're having tonight as far as cushion, we should have been having 2 weeks ago, and it didn't fall that way.
Yeah, the point is the information doesn't change.
Well, you don't know that. I mean, like I said, we just had a 5-minute conversation on conservative revenue estimates, and if we had this conversation a few weeks ago, and I think we could have vetted it a little more, I could have slept on it, but
I don't disagree with you, that in fact it would be nice if we had this information a year and a half ago.
well, isn't that our duty to make sure that we have
Yeah, but our
information that we
duty,
feel comfortable with?
you know, I'm not get argumentative with it, our duty is to present it to the people
Sure.
to the best of our ability.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know that I feel comfortable that I'm doing that to the best of my ability with the short time frame and the severe excess that the estimate came at.
I'm totally not rushing this conversation. I just want you to know that this clock is slow.
Yeah, we could
Said
set
it's 7:17.
All right.
So I'm not rushing the conversation. No, I just want everybody to know. So Bill, do you have?
I just have,
Oh, okay. You have more questions.
we have the 90 back, the 25 back is 325. We take out the 90, we're at 235. Is that what I'm hearing is the cushion, projected cushion for next year?
And that's- as conservative as it is, that's conservative end of it.
Right, so if you're assuming a 100,000 increase, then we really expecting 230 or something in
The motor-
excise, motor vehicle excise
You
tax.
should be getting at least another 100,000 motor vehicle than we're anticipating.
Right. So last year, we had the same discussion, right? We wanted a $300,000 cushion, and we were kind of upset. We couldn't figure out how we're gonna maintain that cushion, right? So I'm worried that we're saying we've got this cushion now, and come January, February next year, we're in the same boat we were this year.
So, last year, we were worried about the $300,000 cushion, and we ended up with a $581,000 cushion. So we ended up with a lot more than what we anticipated, what we were trying for. And part of that is because we wanted the 300,000, and we were also making room for this debt. So, but we knew the debt wouldn't hit that year, so. But, yeah, it could be that we can't get the $300,000 cushion if we do the fire suppression and this under the levy. And, I mean, truthfully, I feel my vote would be to do it within the levy, but I'm only one person, and that's just how I feel.
Okay. Final question for Sandy and Charlie. You guys are closest to these details.
Just draw.
What would you do?
I'd be going under the levy limit.
Yeah, that's
I
what
mean, because there are two reasons. One, I think we're able to pull it off financially. Second is that I think it has the best chance of getting approved under the levy limit. I think, as you know, I've talked about this in general terms before, not just for this project. It is much more difficult getting a debt exclusion passed at the town election than it is getting, and that's by simple majority, than getting 2/3 at a meeting like tonight.
Right.
I think, you know, I think it's good, if we get 2/3, it's gonna be fairly close. And like I mentioned with the fire department back in '05, that was an override on our debt exclusion. That was 90%, 95% yes at town meeting, it was 55% at the election.
And that was for a full-time fire department. It wasn't for a building, that was to provide a full-time service.
And a debt exclusion is still a type of override.
Yes, it's a temporary
So, it's a
override.
temporary override,
For
just for
20
the,
years.
the length of the bond, but it is still a type of override, so it is still a way around that 2.5% increase in your yearly budget. So, I mean,
I want the project
again.
to succeed, this has the best chance of doing it.
That's the bottom.
So we can either, I mean, we have 3 other articles, so we have 4 articles total that we need to take votes on tonight. I think the 3 other ones we can probably vote pretty quickly on the floor. But
You already voted to support the raises. In fact, you were very generous in your support of those. And, you know, I do mention that in my speech that we have your total support, but please feel free to weigh in if you feel you'd like to. Everybody individually has the right to do that.
And as a reminder, if you want to speak as a taxpayer or resident, we get up and go to the mic in the middle.
If you're speaking, typically, if you're speaking against what the vote was of the finance committee,
Yeah.
you really should.
Yeah.
But if you're speaking as a finance committee and having the same vote, you can sit at the table.
All right.
So does someone want to make a motion for Article 1? We've got 2 versions. One is the debt exclusion version and one is the under the levy.
Where's the second one?
It's on the second page.
I'll make a motion to approve Article 1 within the levy limit as drafted and proposed by the Board of Selectmen on page 2.
I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second to support the debt exclusion not planned. That's the second version of Article 1 within your packet that would go under the levy limit. Is there any other discussion or questions? All those in favor of recommending under the levy?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Article 4.
We'll recommend to pass over this one.
All right, so the Board of Selectmen recommends to pass over. Does anyone want to make a motion for the Finance Committee to recommend to pass over?
I'll make a motion to pass over Article 4.
I'll second the motion.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you. Article, well, entertain a motion on Article 5.
There is the possibility of getting funding from the state. We're going to look into a disability grant, but that's going to be months off. I think the board's going to be in consultation with the building inspector as to the necessity of getting this work done earlier rather than later. Rob's indicated there's a possibility that we could wait until next spring. He thinks if whatever my repairs are still needed for it, they might hold up. But I think the board's concern, and they need to talk with Rob about this, is that we've been put on notice in essence about the defects. And if something happens, we're that much more liable, just in terms of legal obligations. So what I've done is, I put in the $35,000 from the general stabilization fund, because I don't want to have to, if it turns out in the next couple of months we have to actually get this work done, I don't want to come back to the finance committee for taking half of the reserve fund to get this work done.
Do we have any minor details at all on the cost?
I don't have anything from the building committee. That was a number that I had heard at one point. I don't have an engineer, I don't have anything.
We're really speculating.
Yeah.
I thought the number was pretty high, but on the other hand, better to have it built in. If we have to do something with it, we're going to need some engineering costs. We're going to have to arrange for a temporary ramp. So there's some other peripheral costs. We just don't know. We don't know the extent of the damage. It may be something we can repair, it may not. Ultimately, the best solution is a poured concrete ramp with tubular handrails. But we just don't know. It came up so suddenly.
So in my seat, how do I look at the 35 and make a recommendation one way or the other?
Yeah, that's a tough call. That's a tough call. Actually, I was hoping it would read not to exceed 35,000.
Well, I can't
Yeah, I know.
go beyond 35 for this.
I know, I understand, but just for perception.
Yeah, well, I mean, the motion can read that way.
Because I don't think it's going to come up to that kind of number, but we've been wrong before, so.
Which is a little gun shy.
Yeah, exactly.
That's like 300,000.
Yeah, right. 1.4 million.
But I mean, if the town meeting and, if you all recommend against it, town meeting agrees with you, okay, that's fine, but know that I may very well see you all in a couple of months for 35 or whatever the number is.
For a transfer, yeah.
Yeah, for legal fees.
We're not going to do it unless we have to, and we're only going to do what we have to do. But if it makes more sense to replace it, it makes more sense to replace it. I didn't actually want to present this article.
Can we abstain from I abstain.
Because if you think the other one's a little nebulous, this is more so.
Yeah,
But at least the numbers,
swallowable.
So we don't have a formal estimate, this is just kind of a shot in the dark.
this is just to leave enough money to do it right.
I think it's low. Pretty bit low, actually.
I did one about 5 years ago, it was maybe 10, 11 grand. But I don't know how long this one has to be, what we have to do. The codes have changed a little bit. We need a more platform area. It may have to go out a little further. We have to get some engineering work done.
Scout
We
stand,
just
what's the
don't know.
code? Right.
And then we're gonna put the toll booth in there, so we just collect the revenue.
Well, the important thing is we have at least 2 handicapped employees that this becomes.
Well, right now we have 3,
Right now, 3, yeah, temporarily 3 at least.
but 2,
So-
yeah,
so
long
we
term
have-
that need.
It's 726.
We have more of an urgency,
Sorry,
excluding the public use.
it's 726.
We can either hold these Article 5 and Article 7 and take a vote on the floor, or we can try to get through them in 2 minutes.
Article 7 is going to be passed
Yeah.
over.
All right,
I make a motion to pass over Article 7.
you want a second?
I'll second.
All right, any discussion or questions? All those in favor of passing over Article 7? Aye.
Thank you, everybody, for making.
All right, Article 5, this is the last one.
Is that the floor?
Yeah, we can do that on the floor. So what's gonna happen is we'll kind of huddle up and we'll have to communicate to Kendra.
Yeah, I'll just watch it.
Yeah. It'll still be the same thing, motion, second.
Been here, done that. Yeah, just point.
All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
I make a motion.